Last month, in a sermon writing class, a handful of tapestry friends tackled writing and delivering their own sermons. It was fun to teach about the process of generating ideas and the types of stories or examples that work and the basics of preaching. This week, though, I realize an important piece is missing from that workshop, and that's how to do theological reflection. At the conclusion of the workshop, each participant was invited to preach the sermon that they had written. As usual, they brought thoughtful and inspiring sermons. Scott Noonan shared a touching sermon about a t-shirt that he sometimes wears with the characters Frog and Toad on it. If you don't know, Frog and Toad are friends with a sweet relationship that often includes very mundane activities. Scott's sermon focused on the special quality of companionship, which is easy, without much talking. Perhaps you know that feeling from a pleasant road trip that turns quiet, or shared silence in our time of meditation. Scott's sermon ended up being a little shorter than the prescribed 15 to 20 minutes. And I told him if he wanted to add something, he might include some theological reflection. That's a fancy way of saying, what does that idea or experience tell you about the sacred? Or what it means to be fully human? With the example of easy companionship, I asked Scott, where else in your life do you get that feeling of deep belonging? What you describe is a sense of enough, a moment of salve, a glimpse of salvation that humans build in community. Is there salvation to be found in human relationship? Does silence or stillness have some innate value or power? In the sermon writing class, I failed to talk about theological reflection, but that's what we're talking about today. How can we engage our imaginations to enrich our faith? With the upcoming move, at least 5 different people have asked me if I am taking the books for the Time for All Ages that we have used. The answer is yes. I am taking the ones that I have purchased. But the RE space upstairs holds a huge collection of good children's books. And of course, the Orange County Library has their own collection with wise librarians who can tell you way more than I can. But here's the deal. A good children's book is a great piece of imaginative theology. Those stories offer us a lesson about the world below the surface of things. Frog and Toad, or Dr. Seuss, Alexander and the Terrible, Awful, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, or Swimmy, and all the other stories that you appreciate each make a bold claim about the nature of life and the moral universe. The stories you love most are creative theology, using metaphor and story to tell a much bigger truth. G.K. Chesterton said, "Fairy tales are more than true, not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us dragons can be beaten." Theology doesn't just happen in dusty volumes or lecture halls or libraries. It happens every day when we use metaphor and imagination to think about this big, beautiful world. Sometimes people misunderstand the openness of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The misunderstanding goes in 2 different directions. One is the fallacy that you can believe whatever you want and be a UU. The other one is that Unitarians don't really believe anything at all. The truth is actually a lot more challenging. Through the Protestant Reformation, we inherited something called the priesthood of all believers. It sounds a little bit like the title of a horror movie. The priesthood of all believers. In the Christian context, it meant that all Christian believers are priests and have direct access to God without intermediaries. Now remember, this was a critique of Catholicism. It's rooted in the idea that through faith, all believers are called to serve one another. For us today, in our expansive and dynamic UU faith, we've widened the circle, but this concept remains. For Unitarian Universalists, all people have direct access to truth and to the sacred through their own direct experience. And through our engagement with that truth, we are called to serve and to minister to one another and the wider world. There's just as much obligation in this arrangement as there is power and privilege. Having a serious belief grounded in experience of what is sacred and true, having belief that motivates us to action is not easy or convenient. In fact, it's incredibly inconvenient. But it is the expectation of our faith. Part of why we use monthly themes in our worship at Tapestry is to invite everyone into the imagination and curiosity. Each month, the topic invites everyone not just to listen to what I have to say, but to wonder for yourself, what did the religion of my past have to say about that? What does my secular education or science have to say about that? Where do I see the stories from literature or mythology or my own family lore? Tell me about that. Hopefully, sometimes worship also makes us a little uneasy or even uncomfortable. And that's the invitation to ask, what about this topic makes me uncomfortable? Do I disagree with what I'm hearing? Am I hungry for something I don't have? Am I being challenged to act differently? Does this topic cause grief for something that I had but have lost? The best place that I know of to exercise theological imagination is at the beginning. I mean the beginning. Every culture around the globe has a creation story, a story of how something emerged from nothing, the story of the universe, or they have a creation story that describes how their particular group of people came to be in that particular location. And those stories matter because they weave in suggestions of purpose and value. In the story of Genesis, we hear that on the seventh day, God rested. And to this day, in Jewish community, observing the Sabbath, a day of rest, is at the center of Jewish life. That day of rest suggests a purpose of humanity that is more than work or productivity. Also, in the story of Genesis, we hear that humanity was created in God's image. Related to that, there's a complicated message of humans being given a special place of power and responsibility on the earth. It's a rich story that's been interpreted in 1,000 different ways, and that's just one story. There are many, many other compelling, beautiful stories of how we came to be here. For most of us at Tapestry, we're comfortable with the story of the Big Bang. And yes, that is also a story, not because I disagree with it, but because the ideas are so complex beyond our everyday understanding that we come up with a phrase, the Big Bang, to encapsulate it and make sense of it. It sounds like violent, explosive, chaotic noise. That may not be where you find inspiration. What if we had a big birth instead? It's not that big of a leap. In a short, powerful time frame, something really complex and beautiful was created. From an unimaginably small beginning, with the right circumstances, growth began to occur, and the universe started to organize itself. There was darkness, and there was intensely bright light. It's a miracle that things turned out the way that they did. A baffling combination of danger and creativity and beauty and destruction to bring order into being. All of that drama created a complex, growing existence with an uncertain but hopeful future. That's how I would describe the Big Birth. All of this is here as the fruit of a colossal act of nurturing. More recently, I've been moved by the idea that the universe, or at least the earth, is growing into self-awareness through us. What does that mean? Well, you and I and 8.2 billion other people are stardust. More specifically, we are oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus, and a little sprinkling of other things. Our bodies came from a blob of dust and matter that was drawn together when our own sun provided gravitational force 4.6 billion years ago to form the Earth. And out of that raw material of the universe, here, we are slowly but surely putting together the pieces of the story of how it all unfolded. Our knowledge is obviously very limited, but it's also amazing what we have assembled as intelligent life. This incredibly rare, possibly unique phenomenon in all the universe. We are here with an answer, an awareness of the big picture. Perhaps it's not unique, and hopefully it isn't at the end of the story, but we are in some ways the universe coming to be aware of itself. This scientific wisdom humanity is amassing comes with unique obligations. What are we to make of this big, beautiful creation, this seemingly rare blessing of life? And closer to home, on an individual level, what do we do with all the stories and wisdom that we accumulate in this one precious lifespan? In just a few minutes, we'll sing the hymn, the closing hymn, Bring Many Names. I like to sing it on Mother's Day, in part because of the verse that lifts up the image of strong Mother God, working night and day, planning all the wonders of creation. In the 6 verses of the hymn, we get 6 different pictures of the divine as reflections of gender and age diversity among human beings. Each depiction of God is compelling in its own way. Within Judaism, the oldest historical root of our UU faith tradition, there are 7 different names of God. And you may know that as a sign of respect, one of those names is never said aloud or fully written in Jewish tradition. Muslims honor 99 different names of Allah, actually 99 different attributes of Allah, as described in the Quran. Memorizing those 99 different names is a way of connecting with the sacred. Those who visited our neighbors at the Irvine Hindu Mandir and our Neighboring Faiths program witnessed a worship hall with statues of various gods. It was a buffet for the senses. Each of these little stations was worshipped on a different, or it was used on a different day of the week, depending on the god in question or the holiday. Here in our own faith, sometimes people are amused by the long list of euphemisms we invoke when we try to talk about the sacred. Spirit of life, God of many names, mystery, great compassion, source of being, Gaia, web of life. This week, I'm reminded that our list of names or attributes is in good keeping with our neighbors in faith. All of us grope at words attempting to define what is essentially unknowable, and perhaps most importantly, experienced uniquely by each individual person. What a blessing that our faith tradition invites us to look for ourselves through the kaleidoscope of faith imagination. Infinite combinations of attributes of the sacred are available. But it is up to us to peer through that kaleidoscope lens every once in a while and turn those wheels until we come across an image that resonates with our own lives. Before I close, I want to ask some very classical questions of theological reflection. Now, libraries full of books have been written on these topics, which means to me that there is no single right answer. So don't be afraid to claim what makes sense to you. I can almost guarantee that there is a book out there that supports your belief. So first question, where do you feel most easily connected with the sacred or something really special? Do you sense it among human community or out in nature? Perhaps it comes to you when you encounter artistic beauty or compassion. Do you find God in logic and moments of puzzles solved and insights gained? For many of us, the sacred is most evident when things work out as they should. Where do you most often notice the sacred? Second question, how much power does the sacred have? There are a few options here. Does God control everything, following a plan? Or does the Spirit of life occasionally show up here and there to make things better? Here's an option that you probably haven't thought of. Does the power of the sacred create more opportunity and invite goodness without forcing it? Or, as the deists would suggest, was this big, beautiful world set up with rules and set in motion like a great clock, ticking away while the sacred sits back and watches it unfold? How much power does it have? Third question, is it near or far? Is the sacred nearby and intimate in our very moments in our hearts, or is it a mystery that is far away and unknowable? It's a big spectrum there. Fourth question, this was inspired by our Hindu friends. Do you recognize the power of the sacred, the power of life, most readily in the work of creation or in the work of destruction and clearing space for new? Or is the power of life more about sustaining, moderation, enough? All of these forces on earth are powerful, mysterious, and bring about good. But does creation or destruction or sustenance seem like the way the holy works to you? Fifth and final question. I will raise the question that you seem to be obsessed with. And that's the question of us. This is obviously a spectrum as well. Are we humans basically good or mostly bad? And how does that spot on the spectrum fit with the picture of the sacred that you've conjured up in those other questions? Whether it's in a good children's book, or a hymn, or a flower on the side of the road, or classical questions of theology, this faith is your very own write your own adventure book. It's okay to make some choices and skip to page 52. It's not the end of the world if you don't like the way that adventure unfolds. You can choose to explore a different path. The fun is in the exploration, not in getting it right. Amen.